Hi, welcome. I got to switch the sides because I always lean this way. And if I lean this way on my computer screen and you're on the other side, it just doesn't, it looks
So weird. Yes. Okay. Well, but I've got a green halo, so there you go. We're both.
I do like there are times that every time I'm doing something in person now, I want to wear green because I can't ever wear green with the
Right.
green screen behind, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I am finding that all my green clothes are happening more and more when I'm
Yeah.
in person.
Yes. Right. Well, and as it turns out, it's green isn't green. I mean, as we experimented before, if I turn on my green screen, I become a floating head because somehow or another, this blue is also green. Who knows?
I
Who
mean, the
knew?
floating head's a look. It's a
Yeah.
look, you know.
Yeah.
That's an approach to these
It
videos.
is. It is.
So my name is Tricia Broderick,
And I'm Diana Larsen.
and we co-wrote Lead Without Blame. That was released in 2022, which is it's a month, almost 2 years this month that it has been out, and it feels like yesterday, honestly, but it's
Yeah.
been an incredible experience with this. So.
Right.
And we keep coming back together once a month to do a live together. And partially because we missed each other, but partially there's just so many topics, and to keep digging into it and to keep it kind of fresh for us as to what we want to explore and what we're thinking about as we're heading out and engaging with people out there. And so this month we chose the topic of reflection, and we kind of left it a little bit vague in the description. Partially intentionally, partially because it's been a crazy couple of weeks.
Yeah. Summer, partially because summer.
Partially all the things, so when we say the word reflection, what comes to mind for you?
A number of things come to mind for me. Of course, retrospectives come to mind, looking back, reflecting on what has happened before. But also, when I think about reflection, I think about mirrors. And, where do I see other things reflected in the world? Where do I see my reflection in the broader world? I mean, the common way of thinking about this is retrospectives. And we did use a lot of references to leaders and retrospectives in the Lead Without Blame book, for sure. And so I hope people are picking up on that, because it's just such a powerful tool. It's not just for teams. It's for anybody who really wants to look toward continuous improvement. Reflect on the work you've done and then decide if you want to keep doing it in exactly the same way or if you want to change it somehow. But for some reason this morning, the mirror thing is really resonating with me in terms of reflection. And the other part of that is, am I paying attention to the reflection I see of my own behaviors in the world? Where do I perceive my impact happening? What is that telling me about how I show up and how others perceive my involvement or engagement with them? So that's what's hitting me this morning. What about you?
So building on that a little bit, because I was thinking about this. We don't ever script these for people that are just tuning in for the first time. These are never
Right.
scripted. So I mean, we have a topic, but then we just let it go. and the craziness of this world right now and everything. I'm leaning in. I didn't really think about it in terms of a mirror, right? But I think I like the concept of reflection being different than just continuous improvement, because there is an element of looking at just what is, not to learn necessarily, right? But
Right.
not to just take a moment to take it all in.
Right.
And I started thinking about that. And granted, now anytime I've ever stopped to take it all in, I always learn something. but I think there's just, I'm going to say this, and it sounds, it's not really like a Tricia kind of sentence, but there's beauty in just stopping and taking it in, right? Reflecting back, and not for any real targeted goal or finding fault or finding, like a lesson or even what I would do differently, right? But
Right.
just this element of taking the moment in.
Yeah, reflection is different. I like what you're saying, because reflection is different than introspection.
Yeah.
It's not just navel gazing, right? It is sort of, what do I notice? Taking the moment to sort of stop and smell the roses, right? Reflect on what's going on around me. What am I a part of? What is the greater system that I'm a part of, the bigger whole, right? And yeah, I think that it's so, particularly for people who are in helping roles, because we can get so overwhelmed by what's going on in the world. And I think reflection is part of self-care, particularly if you're in, a helping role, a leadership role, something like that, where you are trying not to just improve things for yourself or your maybe your own family, but also for some larger group of people, for some larger circumstance. Yeah.
I think you just hit it right on the core for me too, because I actually tried finding, I'm like, what's the emotion for the word? You're like sad, depressed, fear, right? Like
Yeah.
overwhelmed and things. And there is an element of when I stop and just kind of take it in, when I just reflect on the bigger picture, the bigger perspective, the bigger system, the fuller dynamic, I'm able to rewrite the story a little bit in my head in a better way, right? Because I think a lot of times I'm so risk management-esque. My kids go, just in case, because that's what I always say, right? Just in case. I'm so risk-oriented that I can start writing a pretty gnarly story about the situation until I take a minute to just reflect and look larger, like not just at myself, not at just what I want to learn or do better, because I am constantly willing to do that. It's just taking it all in so that I can write a better story than, oh my gosh, risk is everywhere, dooms, right? Like, and I can go into that headspace. And so I find that just reflecting back and going, okay, really did that happen, or did this, right? Like what else really happened? And almost to a certain degree, a little objectively at first and then not, right? But just going, how did I feel? And by taking it in that way, it allows me to like have that better narrative so I can go forward, right, with it, and then figure out what to do. Because that's the hardest part. I think so many times we do reflection tied to that continuous learning element.
Right.
We're so focused on the learning part, but we're still coming into the learning part in a headspace.
Right.
That's a little rough, right? Especially if you're overwhelmed and that helping kind of stance as a leader. And so yeah, just taking time to reflect and get a better story helps me then go, okay, let's put this in perspective.
Well, and actually we talk about that a bit in the new Agile Retrospectives second edition. And that in
I need to have that book handy. It's like right there, but I need to
I've got mine right over there. It's
right
a little
up, like,
farther to reach from, but
I know that's mine too, is today.
Esther and David and I talked a lot about is the decide what to do, is the action that comes out of the improvement action that comes out of your retrospective, is that always a doing action, or is it a reflection on, let's really stop and integrate what we've learned, or let's take some time to think about this before maybe in our next retrospective we decide on an action, or I mean that is a legitimate improvement stance, right?
Well,
And that it's not always some big, it can be anything from, okay, we're going to set up an experiment and we're going to go forward, we're going to try this out, we're going to give it the X number of weeks or months or whatever that we're going to experiment with this, then we're going to evaluate it and blah blah. It can be that kind of an improvement action, but it can also be, who do we need to influence, and what kind of, how do we want to go about that? What research do we need to do? It can be those kinds of things too. And it can also be, let's think about this for a while.
Well, that's making me actually think about.
Yeah.
That's making me think. We talk about emotional and social intelligence all the time, right? People highlight it, but it's a really hard concept for some people to kind of grasp and get their minds around it. But in a lot of ways, what you're talking about is building my conscious awareness for social and emotional intelligence.
Right.
If I'm, helping my brain to kind of process what's happening or be aware of it, that in the moment, then the next time it happens, I'm like, okay, this is what happened the last time. I see it better. I see it more clearly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean all biases are going to go away. I just finished reading a book that has got my mind just spinning on bias, like there's nobody's business. But but there is an element of kind of helping build just awareness to increase your social and emotional intelligence. And by just noticing patterns or trends or things along those lines, and you're not actually even doing anything, it will result almost unconsciously in doing something, but that's what you're building with it.
Right. And, we have this interesting, I don't know, so many humans, and I recognize it in myself, and I see it in very many other humans. We have this tendency to think that we will just automatically know the right thing to do, that we can always just follow our gut instinct. And that's not necessarily so. And really building our skill at pausing to reflect, is this really the way we want to go? Or I want to go? I mean, whether it's a group or an individual, is this really the way we want to go? What are the other possibilities here? I mean, that also is part of reflection.
Yeah.
Right. What are my choices? And to just help me feel better that as I build that skill, I am more likely, if I try to automatically respond, that I am going to respond in a wiser way, because I've taken that time to build my reflective capacity.
Yeah, you're really kind of enforcing, like Daniel comment. How do you say his last name? Thinking fast and slow. How do you say his last name? Starts with a K. Thinking fast and slow. Yeah. But that's a whole like system 1 versus system 2, like which one is actually kind of going in there,
right?
With it. Yeah, this is becoming a really fascinating topic for me, and I'm almost like, I almost want to bring up the book and be like, oh, they talked about this on this page, it's an interesting dynamic. But I think this is one of those things of, I need to be more intentional. I mean, I think this is why a lot of people will say intentional about meditation, right? I actually find myself needing to be more intentional about reflection. Like, that was the beauty of a retrospective for me. Like, it was, cadenced or scheduled or intentional with those things. And in my day to day, like, I could be doing more of it, right? And so finding ways to be more intentional about my reflection. What's your favorite, like, kinds of ways that you reflect? Like, do you write? Are you a journaler? Are you a meditative kind of, like, what's your approach?
What is it that I do? I don't journal. I've tried to journal a few times, and I just, I get tired of feeling like I'm failing at a thing. So I set it aside if I'm not, after a while. But I don't exactly regularly meditate, but I do take time in the morning to just say, what's ahead in my day? what's happened in the last X period of time that that has lessons in it for me that I want to apply in my day, or in the, longer period of time that's ahead of me. I do a lot of reflection like this. I'm an external processor. And so in conversation and having someone to talk to about things is a big part of how I reflect. That's why I like to work collaboratively, because it makes that opportunity for reflection to come up so much more for me. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a big part of mine, is just having the discussion, right?
Yeah.
I actually am, as much as I'm not a writer in some ways until I've gotten through that in my head.
Mm.
I actually do write.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised at how much I write, and not in a way that is honestly something I could I don't write long, massive blog post, article kinds of stuff. I write in a way that I find even writing up my concepts for what I want to speak at a conference, or what I want to maybe cover in a podcast and things. Just the art of writing a little bit for me helps me to process it a little bit with things. So I do find that I do that. I wouldn't call it traditional journaling by any means.
Yeah.
But I am trying to find a little bit more like I have, my daily handstand practice, right? So I'm trying to find myself a little bit more, especially with everything that's going on in the world, finding myself trying to do something a little bit in the morning, or even at the end of the day, so I can actually go to sleep. And so I've been doing some stretching at the end of the day, and I refuse to get on my phone. I refuse to and I just think through. I have this thing where I ask my kids always what was the best part of your day, and that helps me to reflect in a way that's not negative biased, right? And whatnot. So I'm doing little things, but I always think I can do more. So if you all have suggestions, throw them in the comments for us as we're going forward too.
One other thing I do, I just realize, it's so much a part of what I do that I didn't even stop to think about it as a way I do reflection. I make posters for myself, little posters. It's one of the reasons I love the thing that you and I do about putting a quote from the book up. I make a little poster, and actually one of them I've now printed out in small cards and things. But over here on my bulletin board, I have 3 questions for starting my day. I have little prompt things on my screen when my big computer goes to sleep. There's a message to me about what's the most important thing for me to do right now. Is it a work thing? Is it getting a hug from my granddaughter? That there's a few little prompts there. I do that. I put little reminders around about, think about this again. This seems important to me.
Reflect.
Think about it again. And, reminding myself, think about this again. And that's one of the ways I do reflection. It's well, how much am I using these 3 questions for starting my day? How much am I using this recommendation for founders, business founders, and, those kinds of, because I've got them posted all over my office, and everywhere I go, I see them, and it makes me stop and think about that poster and the message that I've wanted, that my past self is trying to send to my present self.
I love it. I love it.
Sorry.
What do you have?
It was a little long. I'm sorry.
No, it's perfect. I love it. I like little token, those kinds of things, especially something you can carry with you, right? That's a big dynamic, right, with things. So what do you have coming up?
Well, I've got a few things coming up that are sort of near term, but still in the works. So I don't know if they're going to happen for sure or not. I'm excited about having joined the Agile Network and the things that might be coming up through that. But what I do know about is that I'm going to be speaking at the Pacific Northwest Software Quality Conference in October. And that's I used to be on the board of that I wasn't on the original board, but I joined somewhere along the way because that conference has been going on for well over 30 years now. And it's a very important conference. It sounds like a regional conference, but it brings in people from all over the world. And so I'm pretty excited about being there again. Many years I've got something else that keeps me from going, but this year I got it on the calendar and I kept it, and I'm going to give a workshop and a talk there. And then later in October, I'm going to be keynoting at the Agile Turkey Summit and offering a workshop the day before. So, so that's coming up. And then, a few more things before the end of the year. Next year already, I know I'm going to be speaking at the OOP conference in Munich in early February. So that's going to be really exciting. But yeah, I'll be happy to be back at that again.
Nice international travel. I'm loving it. Loving it.
Yeah.
I have a crazy October coming up. Crazy October. I'm going to try and do it in the order, but I'm not even sure I can do it correctly in the order. So I'll be in Florida, in Orlando for the TechWells AI and DevOps conference. I'll be doing a couple tutorials there. And then I'm going to be heading to Agile Indy. First time. I've had that on my list for a really long time, and I'll be doing a session at Agile Indy this year in October. And then I'm coming back to Richmond, Virginia to do Innovate and Keynote Innovates conference. And then I'm finishing it off in Denver at a women's WCIT Council of Information Technology, I believe it is, keynote for them at the end of October. So conference craziness, and they're all in person, and it just makes me so happy. So I'm gonna be all over the place in October at several different conferences. I'm super thrilled about that. So because of that, I scheduled my last, for the quarter. I mean, I don't do tons of public offerings, but I have my one CSM, my one facilitation, my one leadership course that I do with Jake Calabrese, and then one training, impactful and speaking, all publicly listed. Only doing one of each of those before kind of the end of the year. So it's going to be a busy still closeout, but I'll take it. I'll take busy. But yeah, October seemed to be the conference month, man, for me. Well,
and the other thing I would like to mention is I am going to do a public workshop next spring of facilitating the Agile Fluency game.
Perfect.
And I haven't done it it will be almost 2 years since I've done it. But every so often I get a request. And if a person isn't following my newsletter, the most recent, the September newsletter has a little poll in it that is asking people for feedback on how they would like that workshop to be. Do they want a 1 day? Do they want a 2 day? Different things happen. There's some question about potential dates. I want to get people's feedback about when they would like to see that happening. And so the poll is in my newsletter, which shows up in the news tab on my DianaLarsen.com blog. And or if you're already on the newsletter, be sure to subscribe and you'll get that those kinds of things automatically. But we're trying to get out ahead of it to make sure that we are serving up something that people is going to be not only formatted the way people want, but then also around the logistics and timing.
Yeah, time just keeps flying by.
The one thing we do know is it's going to be here in Portland.
Only fair. It's only fair.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, we had not set the next date yet, so that is to be announced. Later. But we will be back in October, somewhere around both of our travel, and we'll be back, and we'll see you then.